What up, gamers? I'm Aaron, and when the Season 2 dungeons go live, you're gonna learn every single one the hard way, by dying to every single mechanic at least once. You can't help it, it's just the way you're wired. But what if I told you there was a way that you could start dying to these mechanics even earlier, so that when they go live and are slaughtering noobs by the truckloads, you've already mastered them? Well, because you're smart enough to read YouTube titles, you already know that we're talking about WoW's public test realm. But we do have to clear up a misconception. Because a lot of the time, when people hear PTR, they assume that this is a gathering of WoW's best and brightest minds, and that they're determined to test every facet of the new content. But you could not be more wrong, because the key word here is public. This server is open to everybody, even the guy who just solo bricked your last key. And really, Mythic Plus on this side of testing is pretty much exactly the same as the Mythic Plus you're used to. Everyone's UI is just way shittier. Because yes, we are meant to be testing these dungeons. But by the time a dungeon makes it to the PTR, it is usually in a 99% functional state. So a lot of your feedback isn't going to be, this is too buggy to be completed. It's more likely going to be, this is designed so absurdly that I'm not sure I want to complete it. Sort of like the mini-boss in the all-new Altar of Fangs dungeon. I would say that for probably 80% of all PTR users, this server is just a way to play the content early. And you might say, Aaron, isn't that just a blatant competitive advantage? Of course it is! PTR raid testing is what takes 20 good players just hanging out and turns them into a well-oiled machine that's gonna one-shot the first 4 mythic bosses. PTR dungeon testing is what separates the dweebs who have to learn every kick in a 10 from the gamers who are going to be dominating 15s week 1. And for the other 20% of players, the PTR isn't really something that they directly interact with at all. In fact, their only interaction with the PTR is secondhand in the most destructive way possible, by consuming infinite YouTube tier list content. And the problem with that is actually twofold. Firstly, a tier list on the PTR barely matters, because the true meta is completely unknown until the 0.5 patch. Everything up to that is all about just collecting as much IO as you can on your raid character, so that when you inevitably have to re-roll, you can still get invited to keys. And the second problem with these PTR tier lists is that, let's be real, out of the 200 plus channels that will post tier list videos this patch, realistically, only about 5 to 10 of them have any business telling you what's gonna be good at the top level. So when you see somebody post a tier list video, ask yourself, does this guy really know anything about the relative strength of a survival hunter? I know I don't give a shit about survival hunter, so if you ever see me posting a tier list, it means one of two things. Either my ego has gone super massive and I'm just throwing my raw opinion at you, or rent is due, and the $4 of YouTube ad revenue is all that stands between the life I live today and working the corner in Booty Bay. So this whole thing leaves us with two questions. Firstly, if the PTR is such a big advantage, should you be using it? And secondly, should that kind of advantage exist at all? Well, to address the first point, look, I don't want to discourage you, but we're at the point of Midnight Season 1 where you should know by now whether you're gonna reach your goals or not. I mean, if your ass just finished your Resilient 17s, you are not about to make a miracle run for the Mythic Plus title. And if you want to do keys, and you want to do them in a way that matters, well then it's pretty likely you're gonna get more from your first murder row than you will your 40th Pit of Sauron. And really, in almost every season that I have done dungeon testing, I can really only think of 2 or 3 times where something has ended up mechanically harder once the dungeons go live. So usually, if you get something down on the PTR, it's going to be even easier once the dungeon goes live. But it's also not like you're completely fucked if you don't do testing either, There are plenty of god gamers who do no testing whatsoever and will soar to great heights this season. But usually, that's because they either do the research and are prepared for what they need to do, or they have herd immunity, and they just play with so many other good players that things will probably work out until they catch up. But remember that whether it's by doing testing yourself, or doing the homework required to be ready for it, setting yourself up to blast early is the best thing you can ever do for your season. So really, the choice is yours. Do you want to come out kicking ass day one? Or do you want to see how fast your guildmates start showing offline once you solo deplete a 7? And hey, you might get some really cool opportunities too, because there are a lot of very good players on the PTR. And yeah, they wouldn't look twice at you on the live servers, but here, they're desperate for a body and you look just good enough. But you gotta remember to play it cool, because the PTR community is very small, and they'll probably remember you. But don't worry if you do anything too embarrassing, because name changes are free on this server. So if you're feeling convinced but you aren't sure how to start, really all you have to do is copy your character, go to Stormwind or Orgrimmar, and talk to one of these 10,000 vendors to collect your absolute best gear and just start queuing up for groups. But really, the more important question is, should this be a thing? Should we really live in a world where you can test 80% of a patch before it's even started? Well, in an ideal world, probably not. Because it would be really cool to have every single player more surprised by what's coming, and having to figure out all of this at the exact same time. But imagine the most broken patch you can think of. Even just since Dragonflight, you have quite a few to choose from. Now imagine if that broken patch was completely untested, and how much worse it would probably be. So I guess I'd rather live in a world where we have public testing than a world where 11.1.5 was even more absurd than it was. But look, I honestly think a lot of players also kind of over-romanticize the figuring shit out phase. Because really, most of the figuring things out is done by a very small portion of the community. And most other people, like the ones who are consuming infinite tier lists, are simply going to get their routes, strategies, and opinions from someone else. But if you are one of the chosen few who wants to innovate their own way, then don't worry. Because remember, Midnight Beta had completely open 24/7 free-for-all Mythic Plus testing. And the strategies we've got today blow everything we had back then out of the water. So even if we do have tons of Mythic Plus testing, you have plenty of time left to cook the craziest strategies you can think of. And speaking of having plenty of time left, I've recently learned that I have a very small segment of senior citizen viewers. So even if you thought that this video was shit, make sure you send it to your grandparents. I'm sure they'll love what's coming next. But until then, I'm Aaron, and thanks so much for your time. Peace. But you could not be more wrong.